beneath the glow of chandeliers and the soft pull of string music. Jameson McAllister stood alone on the balcony overlooking the city square. The event inside was a celebration of the hotel's latest accolade. Another glossy magazine cover, another nod to his empire of elegance. People toasted his name. They laughed a little too loudly, lingered a little too long in their compliments, always careful not to look too closely. Jamie swirled the bourbon in his glass, the amber liquid catching the light. But his gaze was fixed on something beyond the party, on the street below. He'd built everything people could admire from afar. The McAllister name was a fixture in Savannah, tied to real estate, luxury, power. But behind every success was silence. Behind every award was a sense of distance. He took a slow breath. There she was, again, the woman with the twins. She sat just across the street under a crooked oak tree near the stone fountain. Quiet, unmoving. One child rested in her lap, the other leaned into her shoulder. Her coat was too thin. The girls wore matching faded sweaters, their blonde hair tangled from sleep or wind. Jamie hadn't meant to notice her the first night, but he had, and then the second. And now it was the third. Something about her was different. The city had its share of need. He donated, funded shelters, held fundraisers, but this was different. The woman wasn't pleading, wasn't shouting, wasn't waving a sign. She was just there, waiting for nothing, as if hope had worn thin but pride still held. A movement caught his eye. One of the girls stirred and looked up. Her eyes, startlingly blue, searched the street. She whispered something to her mother, then snuggled closer. And that's when Jamie saw it. A flash of silver at the woman's neck, barely visible under her coat. A pendant, round, familiar. He stepped closer to the railing, breath caught. That necklace, he knew it. He had held it once between shaking fingers in the back of a beat-up truck, after a summer rainstorm, had fastened it onto a laughing girl who smelled like jasmine, and trouble, and home. Number it couldn't be. Jamie turned away, set his drink down on a nearby tray, and excused himself from the party without a word. Sophie, his longtime assistant, caught the movement and tilted her head. "Mr. McAllister." "I'll be back in a minute." Outside, the night air no longer felt warm. The click of his shoes on the stone steps echoed too loudly. He crossed the street, hands in his pockets, slowing as he reached the edge of the square. The woman looked up. Their eyes met, and for a moment, time bent. Clara May Bishop. Her face was thinner, her eyes duller, but it was her. She didn't speak. Neither did he. Hazel. He remembered she always said she'd name her first daughter that. Tugged on her sleeve. "Mama, I'm hungry." Clara pulled her close, not breaking eye contact. Her hand moved protectively across both girls. Jamie's throat tightened. "I don't mean to intrude," he said, his voice softer than he intended. "I just—" Clara looked down at the girls, then back at him. "Do you always talk to women sitting on sidewalks?" He almost smiled. "Only the ones wearing my necklace." A pause. The girls blinked up at him, curious and confused. Clara stood, still shielding them with her coat. "You shouldn't be here," she said, tone quiet but firm. "Not like this." "Neither should you," he replied. She didn't answer that. He could feel the weight of the moment settling on his chest. There was so much he wanted to ask, but the space between them was wide, years wide. "I can help you," he offered gently. "Just for tonight, a warm bed, for the girls." No. The refusal was immediate, not angry, just solid. Hazel sneezed, Hope whimpered and pressed her face into Clara's coat. Jamie hesitated, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a small business card. He crouched, carefully, calmly, and placed it on the fountain's ledge beside her. He stood. "I'm staying in the penthouse, room 1201, if you change your mind." Clara said nothing. He didn't expect her to. As he turned to leave, Hazel whispered, "Mama, he seems nice." Jamie kept walking, but her voice followed him. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the Grand Magnolia's penthouse suite, bathing the marble floors in gold. Jamie sat at the edge of the bed, unmoving, the untouched coffee on the nightstand now cold. He hadn't slept. The image of Clara, her face weathered by life, those piercing eyes still guarded, still fire underneath, was etched into him. He tried to convince himself it wasn't her, but the moment their eyes met, the past came rushing in like the tide on Tybee Island. 17 years old. A summer of wild laughter, whispered dreams under trees dripping with moss, the two of them chasing a future they didn't yet understand. She had vanished. No goodbye, no note. Just gone. Now here she was again, on the sidewalk, with two little girls who looked too much like him to ignore. Jamie stood and walked to the wide windows overlooking the city. From this height, Savannah looked peaceful, distant, as if struggle didn't exist beneath its charming balconies and cobblestone streets. A soft knock pulled him from thought. Sophie stepped in without waiting. She was always 3 steps ahead of him, sharp, composed, loyal to the bone. "I checked the square this morning," she said, holding an iPad. "She's gone." Jamie didn't answer. "She didn't use the room," Sophie added, watching his face. "No one picked up the key." "I didn't think she would." He reached for his blazer. "But I need to know where she went." Sophie tilted her head. "Can I ask why?" Jamie turned slowly, buttoning his jacket. "Because she disappeared once, and I didn't go after her. I'm not making that mistake again." She didn't push further, but something in her expression softened. "Her name is Clara Bishop. No formal ID on file, but there's a record of her at the Peachtree Shelter 3 months ago. Before that, she bounced between community kitchens and a women's transitional house. There's nothing before that." "There wouldn't be," he muttered. "She used to be Clara Whitmore." Sophie blinked. "As in, you're—" "Yes." That was all he needed to say. She studied him, then nodded slowly. "I'll keep looking." Jamie hesitated, then spoke low. "The girls, they're hers." "Yes, Hazel and Hope, 6 years old." He didn't ask the next question. He didn't need to. That evening, while the rest of Savannah glowed under string lights and jazz from open-door lounges, Clara tucked the twins into a narrow cot inside a quiet corner of a small church. The building wasn't a shelter officially, but the pastor had taken her in once before. Hazel curled into her side, thumb in mouth, while Hope traced circles on the old quilt with her finger. "Mama," Hope whispered, "was that man your friend?" Clara stilled. "No, baby, not anymore. But you knew him." Hazel's voice was soft, but not sleepy. Awake, watching. Clara stared at the cracked ceiling. "I did," she said after a moment. "A long time ago." Silence settled again. Hope, persistent as ever, lifted her head. "Is he our daddy?" The question sucked the air out of the room. Clara didn't move, didn't breathe. She sat up gently, brushing hair back from her daughters' faces. "No, sweetheart. He's someone I used to know. That's all." It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. She couldn't afford the truth. Not yet. Not when their lives were already balanced on such a fragile edge. Later that night, after the girls had drifted into shallow, restless sleep, Clara stepped into the hallway. The church was quiet, lit only by a single bulb above the exit sign. She wrapped her coat tighter, rubbing her arms. She hadn't meant to go back to that corner, but something had pulled her there. Not desperation, not even hope. It was the way Jamie had looked at her. Not with pity, with recognition, as if all the time in between hadn't erased her completely. "Clara?" She turned, startled. Pastor Elijah stood at the end of the hall, a soft smile on his face. "I thought I saw you come in earlier. You're always welcome here." "Thank you." Her voice cracked slightly. He stepped closer, hands clasped gently. "You look tired." She managed a faint smile. "That obvious, huh?" He chuckled. "You want to talk?" Clara hesitated. "I ran into someone today. Someone from before." He didn't ask who. "You think it's a blessing?" he asked gently. "Or a test?" "I don't know," she said. "It felt like both." He nodded slowly. "The past has a funny way of knocking twice. First when we ignore it, then when we're finally strong enough to open the door." Clara didn't speak for a long moment. "I don't know if I want the door open," she whispered. Elijah tilted his head. "Maybe it's not about what you want. Maybe it's about what your girls need." That hit harder than she expected. He stepped back. "We'll be here tomorrow, if you need to rest a little longer." Clara nodded. As he disappeared down the hall, she stood alone again, surrounded by shadows and quiet. And that's when she saw it. Folded neatly on the corner chair by the entryway. A small hotel towel. A room key. A note. It read, "Room still open. No pressure. Just warmth. Jay." Her hand trembled slightly as she held the card. She should throw it away, should pretend none of this happened. But as she slipped it into her coat pocket, Clara knew something had shifted. Whether she liked it or not, the past had found her. And this time, it wasn't letting go. The Grand Magnolia's lobby was quiet at dawn. Just the hum of distant laundry carts, the soft click of heels from overnight staff, and the muted rustle of the day's first newspapers being placed at every suite door. Jamie stood near the reception desk, dressed but not polished. No tie, shirt sleeves rolled. His coffee sat untouched on the counter beside him, cooling fast. He hadn't expected her to come, and yet he'd left the room key again. This time, he told himself, was the last time. He was a man of systems, of plans, of structure. There was no plan here, no structure to falling backward into a memory that walked like a stranger and spoke like a ghost. He turned toward the glass doors, almost ready to leave. When the elevator chimed, his breath caught. The doors opened with a soft ding. She stepped out slowly, the twins close to her sides. Clara's coat was still threadbare, but her back was straight. The girls clung to her hands, their eyes wide with awe at the chandeliers and velvet carpet. Jamie stood still, watching, waiting. She spotted him. For a long moment they didn't speak. Then Clara lowered her gaze. "I came because of them, not you." Jamie nodded. "I know." Hazel stepped forward. "Is this where princesses live?" Clara kneeled to her daughter's level, brushing her hair back. "No, baby. Just a place to rest, remember?" Hope looked up at Jamie. "Do you work here?" He smiled gently. "Something like that." Clara looked at him then. Really looked. Not the teenager she once loved, not the dreamer, but the man in front of her. There was distance, but also recognition. Jamie turned to the front desk. "Can you bring up some warm food to room 1201? French toast, scrambled eggs, orange juice. Make it extra sweet." The receptionist nodded. Clara's voice cut through. "We're not staying the whole day." "You can leave whenever you want," he said, eyes steady. "Just let them eat first, please." She hesitated, then gave the smallest nod. Inside the suite, warmth wrapped around them like a breath. Plush carpets, soft lights, a view of the city painted in early sunlight. The girls ran straight to the couch, giggling at how deep they sank into the cushions. Clara stood near the door, arms crossed. Jamie motioned toward a chair. "You don't have to hover like you're ready to bolt." "That's exactly what I'm ready to do." He tried to smile but gave up halfway. "I didn't know," he said softly. "Clara, I didn't know where you went, why you left." She didn't answer. He walked to the window. You could have told me. Her laugh was dry, bitter. Told you what? That your mother called mine and told her I wasn't welcome in your world, that we were a mistake to be corrected. Jamie turned, eyes narrowing slightly with surprise. She said I'd ruin your future, and you— Clara paused, voice quieter now. You were already fading. One unanswered call, then another. I took the hint. Jamie stepped closer. I didn't fade. I was pushed. You didn't fight. Silence. The food arrived, breaking the tension with clinking dishes and the faint smell of cinnamon. The girls squealed at the sight, digging in happily. Jamie watched them, awe flickering in his eyes. They're beautiful, he said, voice hushed. They're everything, Clara replied. They're why I've been freezing on benches and swallowing my pride for years. I didn't know about them. I know. Jamie looked at her, jaw tense. I would have helped. Number you would have rescued. There's a difference. Her words hit harder than he expected. Clara sat finally near the window, hands resting in her lap. You have no idea what it's like to wake up and count how many slices of bread you have left, to pretend not to be hungry so they can eat first, to tell bedtime stories so they forget they're cold. Jamie's voice was quiet. I'd like to try, to understand. She looked at him for a long moment. You don't get to just understand, she said. You get to listen. That's it. He nodded slowly. Okay, then I'll listen. The girls laughed from the couch. Hazel held up a syrup-covered fork triumphantly. Jamie smiled. I didn't come here to open old wounds, Clara murmured. I didn't either. They sat in silence again, but something had shifted. Less edge, more air between the words. Jamie finally spoke. I have a place, quiet, on Tybee Island. If you ever wanted— No. He stopped. She sighed. Not yet. I don't trust this. I don't trust you. Jamie nodded again. Fair. Clara stood. We'll stay until noon. Then we'll go. Jamie didn't argue, didn't beg. He simply asked, Will you let me see them again? Clara didn't look at him. That depends. On what? On whether you keep showing up. Not for me. For them. He exhaled, long and low. I will. She gathered their coats from the couch, her movements practiced and gentle. Hope looked up with syrup on her cheek. Can we come back tomorrow, Mama? Clara paused, and Jamie saw it. Just for a second. The war in her eyes. Yes, baby, she said softly. Maybe. As they walked toward the door, Jamie held it open. Clara passed him, then stopped just before stepping into the hallway. She turned slightly, voice almost a whisper. I kept the necklace, because it was the only thing from my old life that felt real. Jamie's eyes met hers. It still is. Then she was gone. But this time, he knew where she was going, and he wasn't going to lose her again. Late afternoon sunlight draped Savannah in soft gold, casting long shadows across the weathered sidewalks of the historic district. The Grand Magnolia Hotel stood tall among the city's ironwork balconies and Spanish moss, its white columns glowing against the peach-colored sky. Inside a high-ceilinged parlor near the east wing, Virginia McAllister adjusted her pearl earrings and glanced at her reflection in the antique mirror. Everything about her was intentional. Hair set, blouse pressed, lipstick just the right shade of coral. She smoothed the hem of her tailored skirt and turned as the door creaked open. Sophie stepped in, holding a tablet. He's been quiet all afternoon. Virginia raised an eyebrow. He left the gala early last night, cancelled brunch with the donors, and now this. She took a slow breath. I assume this has to do with the woman. Sophie hesitated, which told Virginia everything. Virginia walked to the French windows and looked out over the city. You know, Jameson used to be predictable, practical, focused. Now he's distracted by a woman who, if I'm not mistaken, hasn't crossed our doors in over a decade and reappears with children. Children who might be his, Sophie said quietly. Virginia turned, voice cool. And what if they are? Are we to rewrite everything for a sidewalk romance? They're not a romance, Sophie said, soft but steady. They're history, and maybe a second chance. Virginia's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. She walked to her desk, picked up a pen, and tapped it twice on a monogrammed notepad. He's the face of this hotel, of our family name. There are eyes on us constantly. Any misstep affects not just his image, but ours. Or maybe, Sophie said carefully, this isn't a misstep. Virginia paused, the pen in midair, but she said nothing more. 2 blocks away, Clara sat on the edge of a twin bed in a modest room behind the church, folding a pair of the girls' jeans. They were too short again. She sighed and pressed the fabric flat, smoothing out the wear as if it might fix the truth. The girls were napping on the cot beside her, cheeks flushed from a warm meal and morning sunshine. For the first time in days, their stomachs were full, their hair was clean, their eyes sparkled, and Clara was terrified. Jamie had seen them, spent time with them, watched them eat and laugh and stretch out across velvet furniture like they belonged in that world. A world that once whispered promises to Clara, until it closed its doors and left her standing on the outside. She pressed her palm to her temple. What was she doing? Why did she let them go? Why did she let him in? A soft knock broke the spiral. She opened the door to find Pastor Elijah holding 2 small grocery bags. I picked up a few things, he said gently. Some cereal, applesauce, and socks. Clara blinked back a sudden sting behind her eyes. You didn't have to. I know, he said, but I wanted to. She stepped aside, letting him in. He placed the bags down, glancing at the sleeping girls with a smile. They looked peaceful. For now. Pastor Elijah turned to her, his voice low. Jamie came by earlier, asked about you. Clara stiffened. Of course he did. He didn't push, just wanted to make sure you were safe, that the girls had what they needed. She looked down. He's trying to make up for the past. Maybe, Elijah nodded. But maybe he's trying to build something in the present. Doesn't have to be the same thing. Clara didn't respond. I've seen men return because of guilt, Elijah said. And I've seen men return because of love that never left. It's not my place to say which one he is. But you'll know. You always do. She swallowed hard. I don't trust him. Good, Elijah said. Trust isn't free. Let him earn it. That night, Jamie sat on the rooftop terrace of the hotel, a blanket over the railing and a cup of tea cooling in his hands. The sky above Savannah glittered in silence, stars winking behind passing clouds. He didn't hear the door open behind him. I was told you were up here. Sophie's voice broke the stillness. He turned, eyes tired. Wanted to be somewhere quiet. She nodded and took the seat beside him. For a moment, they just sat. The sound of the fountain below filled the gap. You love her, Sophie said finally. Jamie didn't answer immediately. I never stopped, he said softly. But I thought I had to. Sophie looked at him. Really looked. Then this time, don't wait for the world to give you permission. Jamie turned toward her. Virginia's going to have something to say about this. She already does. He winced. And she thinks you're losing focus. She's not wrong. Sophie smiled. Maybe she's just afraid of what she doesn't understand. They sat in silence again. She still loves you, Sophie said, in her way. I know. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. I'm not asking Clara to come back into my life. I'm asking to be part of theirs. The girls. They're incredible, smart, funny. Hope drew me a picture today. Said it was a welcome back card. Sophie's eyes softened. What did you say? I told her I hoped I deserved it. The wind picked up gently, brushing against the ivy on the walls. You're not perfect, Jamie, Sophie said, standing. But if you keep showing up, that might be enough. He watched her leave, then turned his gaze back to the stars. Down the street, in a quiet room behind a church, Clara lay awake, and for the first time in years she didn't feel invisible. Clara stood at the edge of Troop Square, her fingers laced tightly around 2 paper cups of hot cocoa. The girls were on the swings behind her, their laughter bright and free, cutting through the crisp morning air. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves, sending golden flakes dancing across the cobblestone. She hadn't meant to come here, not to this park, not to this moment, but something about the sunlight this morning, the way the girls had been humming to themselves as they walked, had pulled her here like a tide she couldn't resist. And then she saw him. Jamie, seated alone on a bench just across the playground, one hand holding a coffee, the other resting on his knee. No phone, no papers, just him. He didn't look up right away. He was watching the twins, quietly, as if memorizing every motion. Clara stood frozen for a breath too long. Her first instinct was to turn around, walk away before the weight in her chest became too loud. But Hazel spotted him. "Mama, that's the man from the hotel." Hope waved. "Hi again." Jamie's head lifted. His expression was unreadable at first, somewhere between surprise and something softer. He stood slowly, not rushing, not assuming. Clara exhaled, walked toward him, and offered one of the cocoa cups. "You always hang around children's parks?" she asked, eyebrow raised. "I'm here for the swings," he replied, lips quirking into a half smile. "They don't judge my form." She smirked in spite of herself, then sat on the bench beside him, keeping a small but present distance. The girls ran, chasing one another in circles. Clara watched them, then turned to Jamie. "Why are you doing this?" He blinked. "Doing what?" "This, following us, showing up at playgrounds, offering French toast like it fixes anything." Jamie leaned forward, rubbing his hands together. "I don't have a speech," he said. "I thought I might. Rehearsed one for about 5 hours, but it all came out sounding like excuses." Clara looked away. "So instead," he continued, "I'll just tell you what I know. I know I failed you. Back then, when you needed me." The breeze picked up. Clara's curls shifted against her cheek. She didn't move them. Jamie's voice lowered. "And I know. I want to be here now. For the girls. For you, if you let me." She let the silence stretch before answering. "They don't know," she said quietly. "Who you are." Jamie nodded. "I figured. I didn't want them to grow up thinking someone was supposed to show up and didn't." His throat tightened. "Thank you for that." Clara finally turned to him. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were tired. "Don't thank me. Just understand. I've had to be everything for them. Mother, father, protector, teacher. And I still can't keep shoes on their feet that fit for more than a month." "I want to help," Jamie said. "No conditions." Her jaw clenched. "There are always conditions, especially with men like you." Jamie's voice was firm but calm. "Then let's change that." They sat there a moment longer. The girls called for Clara to come push the swings. She stood, brushing off her jeans. "I'm not bringing them into a storm." Jamie met her eyes. "Then let me be part of the calm." Later that afternoon, Sophie walked briskly through the Grand Magnolia's executive suite. Tablet in hand, she found Jamie reviewing architectural mock-ups at the long mahogany table. "We have a situation," she said without preamble. Jamie looked up. "Let me guess. My mother." "Not yet. Daniel Rowe." Jamie sighed and leaned back in his chair. "Of course. He's asking questions. Wants to know why you've postponed the expansion talks with the Charleston property. He mentioned board visibility." Jamie rubbed his temple. "He smells blood in the water." Sophie hesitated. "You sure you want to keep this quiet?" Jamie looked at her. I'm not hiding anything, but I'm also not letting them drag Clara into a circus. Sophie nodded slowly. She's strong. She's had to be. He stood, pacing toward the window. This isn't just a fling from the past. He stopped. I think I still love her. But it's more than that. It's the girls. The way Hope hugs without thinking. The way Hazel always wants to know why. They deserve better than what I gave Clara. They deserve a father who shows up. Sophie studied him for a moment, then smiled. Sounds like you're ready to be that. Jamie's phone buzzed on the table. A message from an unknown number. No name, just 4 words. She's at the park. He read it again. His pulse picked up. He turned to Sophie. Reschedule everything this afternoon. She raised a brow. All of it? Yes. He grabbed his jacket. I've got swings to push. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Virginia sipped a glass of tea on the veranda, the ice clinking gently. She watched the newspaper flutter on the wicker table. An article about Jamie's charity work at the centerfold. Good press, clean lines, just the way she liked it. Her assistant approached cautiously. Mom, there's news from the hotel. Virginia raised an eyebrow. Jamie's been seen meeting with Clara Bishop several times now. Virginia didn't react right away. Finally, she set the glass down, folded her hands, and stared at the horizon. Then it seems the past is knocking. And this time, she wasn't sure she wanted to open the door. Rain fell softly over Savannah, the kind of warm, steady drizzle that didn't send people running indoors, but slowed everything down. The streets shimmered under lamplight, slick and glowing like glass. Inside room 1201 at the Grand Magnolia, the girls were asleep beneath fluffy comforters, breathing evenly, their curls spread like halos on the pillows. Clara stood at the window, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the misty city beyond. She didn't know what she was doing here. Not just tonight, not just in this room, but here, in this in-between space, between past and future, between a man she once loved and the world that had broken them apart. Behind her, Jamie moved quietly in the kitchenette, pouring warm milk into 2 mugs. No big gestures. No words he hadn't earned yet. He brought one to her. She took it without speaking. They stood side by side at the window, steam curling between them. I remember when you said you'd never live in a place with elevators, Clara said suddenly. Jamie smiled faintly. I also said I'd never wear cufflinks. She took a sip. The milk was sweet, calming. Do they know, she asked, the people you work with, about me? Not officially, he said. Virginia suspects. Daniel's sniffing around, but no one's confirmed anything. Clara turned to him. And when they do? Jamie's jaw tightened. Then they do. Just like that. I'm not 15 anymore, Clara. I don't need permission to care. She studied him for a long moment. You may not need it, but you still operate in a world that expects you to ask. Jamie didn't argue. He looked down, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something small. The necklace. Her locket. The same one he'd given her all those years ago, polished now, the clasp slightly repaired. I kept it, she said, almost to herself. I know, he said. You wore it. Clara's breath hitched. Because it was the only thing I had left that didn't feel tainted, that didn't change. Jamie's voice lowered. You didn't change either. Not where it counts. She didn't respond. He placed the locket gently on the table beside her, not forcing it, not asking her to take it back. Just, there. It's still yours, he said. A soft knock at the suite door startled them both. Clara glanced at the girls, then stepped toward the door, pausing with her hand on the knob. You expecting anyone? Jamie shook his head. She opened it cautiously. Sophie stood there, raincoat damp, holding a brown envelope. Sorry to come up, she said quickly. But I thought you'd want to see this. Jamie took the envelope, brows furrowing. He opened it and scanned the papers inside. A newspaper clipping, a printed email thread, a photo. Clara moved closer. "What is it?" she asked. Jamie's voice was steady, but his shoulders stiffened. "Daniel's been feeding the press." "About me?" Clara's voice sharpened. "About the girls. About us. Nothing official yet, but it's being floated." Clara stepped back. "Of course." Sophie looked between them. "I'm sorry I tried to intercept it before it got further." "It's not your fault," Jamie said. "It's mine. I should have seen it coming." Clara moved to the other side of the room, pacing, rubbing her arms. "I knew this was going to happen. I knew the minute I let you back in, the world would find a way to rip it open." Jamie approached slowly. "Clara." "No," she said, turning sharply. "This is exactly what I was protecting them from. Headlines, whispers, questions they're too young to understand." Jamie looked at her, his voice low but firm. "You're not the one who did something wrong here." "No," she said, "but I'm the one who pays for it." A silence hung between them, thick with unsaid words. Sophie stepped back toward the door. "I'll give you some space." Clara sank into the chair by the window, the steam from her mug now gone cold. Jamie sat across from her. "You don't have to run." "I'm not running," she said. "I'm retreating." "There's a difference?" "Of course there is," she whispered. "Running is fear. Retreating is survival." He exhaled slowly. "What if I stood in front this time?" She looked at him. "And what would that change?" "Everything," he said. The rain softened to a mist outside. Clara leaned her head back, eyes closed. "I can't live in your world, Jamie. I tried once. I didn't belong then, and I don't now." He leaned forward. "Then let's build something new, somewhere in between." She opened her eyes, searched his face for any sign of pretense. "Don't make promises the press can unravel." "I'm not," he said. "I'm offering space, safety, stability, for them, for you, not a fairy tale." She didn't answer right away. Just as she began to speak, a soft whimper came from the bedroom. "Hazel." Clara stood quickly, disappearing into the room, leaving Jamie alone with the faint hum of the city beyond the glass. When she returned a few minutes later, Hazel curled in her arms, half asleep, thumb resting against her lips. Jamie had already cleared the table. The locket was gone, the mugs rinsed, the envelope tucked away. Clara paused. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For not making this harder." He smiled gently. "For once, I'm trying to do the right thing the first time." She nodded once, then disappeared into the bedroom. Jamie stood alone for a long time, staring at the rain-slicked skyline. He knew the storm wasn't over, but for the first time, he had no intention of sheltering from it. Virginia McAllister stood in the solarium of her estate, staring out at the garden that had been perfectly manicured every Sunday since the year her husband died. Hydrangeas bloomed in pale blue along the wrought iron fence, as if untouched by time or trouble. Everything about her life was orderly, composed, just the way she had built it. But this morning, her hands trembled slightly as she folded the newspaper and laid it gently on the marble table. The headline wasn't bold, but it was there. McAllister heir linked to mystery woman. Children possibly involved. The article was speculative, padded with polite language, and laced with carefully placed innuendo. But Virginia knew how the media worked. She had watched empires rise and fall based on possibly and unconfirmed. She tapped her finger on the table once, then again, and then she picked up the phone. Jamie arrived at the estate an hour later, jaw tense, eyes unreadable. The moment he stepped into the sitting room, he was already bracing. Virginia didn't look up from her tea. "You've been busy," she said, without lifting her gaze. "I didn't come for pleasantries," Jamie said. "No," she agreed, setting the cup down. "You came to explain." He sat across from her. There's nothing to explain. Her name is Clara. The girls are mine. I'm involved. That's it. Virginia met his eyes now, slow and piercing. You're the head of this family name, Jameson. This isn't just about feelings. It's about what you represent. I represent myself. Number you represent a legacy, built by your father, sustained by me, and now being threatened by a scandal you've chosen to walk straight into. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. They're not a scandal. They're my children. And she, Virginia asked, voice sharper, she's the mother of my children. She's the girl I loved, the one I should have fought for. Virginia paused, her mouth tightening. That girl disappeared. Because you made sure she would. The accusation floated in the room like smoke. Virginia didn't deny it. Instead, she reached into a drawer and pulled out a thin envelope. She slid it across the table toward him. Jamie opened it, pulling out a copy of a letter, handwritten, old, from Clara, unsent. His eyes scanned the page. I'm leaving because I don't belong here. Your mother made that clear. I'm not angry. I'm not even surprised. Just tired. Jamie stared at the final line, hands shaking slightly. I hope someday you understand that I walked away, not because I stopped loving you, but because I loved you too much to watch you choose anything less than what you were meant to become. He looked up, voice strained. You knew. Virginia's face remained still. I received that the week she disappeared. I never told you. Why? Because I knew if you saw it, you'd go after her. You would have abandoned everything we'd worked for. Jamie stood abruptly. You mean everything you worked for? Virginia stood too, her voice lower now. Everything we sacrificed for. Don't forget who cleaned up after your father's death. Who rebuilt this empire while you were chasing paintings and poetry. I didn't ask you to protect me. I asked you to trust me. A pause. You didn't just push her out of my life, Jamie said quietly. You took away my choice. Virginia's voice faltered for the first time. And what would you have done? Run off with her? Raise twins in a walk-up apartment above a bakery? Jamie's voice cracked. Yes. Gladly. The room went silent. Virginia looked away. You're making a mistake, Jameson. No, he said, walking toward the door. The mistake was not walking away sooner. Back at the Grand Magnolia, Clara sat on the bed, slowly folding a worn t-shirt into a suitcase. She wasn't running. Not yet. But she was preparing, always preparing. The envelope Sophie had delivered still sat on the desk, untouched since last night. The photos, the printed email threads, her life reduced to paper. She glanced at the clock. The girls would be back soon. Jamie had taken them for ice cream and a carousel ride in Forsyth Park. She'd agreed reluctantly, only because she needed space to think. A soft knock came at the door. She opened it to find Sophie, holding a canvas bag filled with books and puzzles. I thought the girls might like these, Sophie said, stepping inside. Clara nodded, then paused. Why are you doing all this? Sophie looked at her. Because I see how Jamie looks at you. And because I've seen what kind of father he could be. He just needed a reason. Clara sat on the edge of the bed. It's not just about him. It's about all the people who want to tear this down before it even begins. Sophie sat across from her. Then don't let them. Clara let out a breath. I've lived too long in the shadows to pretend I belong in the light. Sophie tilted her head. Maybe it's not about where you belong. Maybe it's about who's standing with you. Clara looked at her, and for a brief second, her guard dropped. They're good girls, she whispered. I know, Sophie said, and they're lucky to have you. The elevator chimed outside the suite. Then came laughter, two small voices, bright and unburdened. Clara stood quickly, smoothing her shirt. Jamie entered carrying Hazel on his back and holding Hope's hand. Hope made me promise to learn how to braid hair, he said breathlessly. Hazel made him pinky swear, Hope added. Clara smiled despite herself. Jamie looked at her, all pretense gone. Stay. Just one more night. Not for me. For them. Clara looked at her daughters, cheeks flushed, hands sticky from cotton candy, and something in her chest finally gave way. Okay, she said softly. One more night. The morning sun crept gently into room 1201, casting pale gold streaks across the white linen sheets. The city was quiet below, still yawning awake as Clara sat at the edge of the bed, watching her daughters sleep side by side, their small hands entwined in dreams. It should have felt like peace, but it didn't. The air was heavy with things unsaid, questions unasked, and truths she hadn't yet been brave enough to speak aloud. She rose quietly, padded across the plush carpet, and stepped into the sitting room where Jamie sat on the couch, laptop open but untouched. His eyes were on her before she spoke. I don't know how to do this, Clara whispered. Jamie closed the laptop and set it aside. You're doing it. She sat across from him, elbows on her knees, staring at the floor. This isn't real life, Jamie. It's borrowed comfort. Sooner or later, the bill comes due. He shook his head. What you're feeling, it's not just fear. It's habit. Survival makes you expect the crash before the quiet even settles. Clara looked up slowly. You speak like you've lived that. I've lived the aftermath, the regret, the ache of knowing I didn't try hard enough when I had the chance. He leaned in, his voice softer now. I don't want to repeat that mistake. Clara swallowed hard. Hazel asked me yesterday why you looked like her. I told her genetics were funny that way. Jamie smiled gently, but there was pain behind it. She has your fire. And your eyes. A pause. She deserves to know who she is, Clara added. Who you are. She will, Jamie said, when you're ready. I'm not sure I ever will be. Then we'll wait. They sat there, the space between them buzzing with everything they didn't know how to hold. The quiet was broken by a soft knock at the door. Jamie stood to answer, but Clara rose with him, instinctively moving toward the girls' room to check they were still asleep. When she returned, Jamie was holding an envelope, his name written in a script she didn't recognize. What is it? Clara asked, heart skipping. He opened it carefully. Inside, a single sheet of paper, professionally printed. His eyes scanned it, then his jaw tensed. Clara moved closer. Jamie. It's from the board, he said quietly. A formal request to address concerns about my personal affiliations. They want a closed-door meeting. She paled. Because of me. Jamie looked at her, and for a moment the weight of everything was visible. Family pressure, public image, responsibility, love, all tangled. They can call as many meetings as they want, he said. They don't get to decide what I care about. Clara's voice trembled. But they can take it all away from you. Jamie stepped closer, closing the space between them. Then maybe it was never really mine to begin with. She turned away, walking to the window, hugging herself. This isn't what I wanted. I didn't come back to break your life apart. He moved beside her. You didn't break anything. You reminded me what matters. Clara's eyes brimmed. I can't go through it again, Jamie. Being blamed. Being the reason things fall apart. He reached out, gently taking her hand. Then let me be the reason they stay together. Before she could answer, a voice chimed from behind them. Hazel, standing in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. Mama. Clara turned quickly, wiping her face. Morning, baby. Hazel wandered over, climbed into Jamie's lap without hesitation, and looked up at him. Can we stay here forever? Jamie blinked, his arms wrapped around her instinctively. I don't know about forever, kiddo, but for today, absolutely. Hope appeared behind her sister, dragging her blanket. And tomorrow, Jamie smiled. We'll talk about that over pancakes. The girls giggled, already forgetting the tension that had filled the room. Clara stood frozen for a moment, watching the way Jamie held them, the ease with which they fit against him. It should have broken her. Instead, it began to mend something. Later that afternoon, Jamie sat in the private courtyard of the Grand Magnolia, waiting for Sophie to return with updates from the board. The air was thick with anticipation, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting beneath his feet. Sophie arrived 10 minutes later, a folder in hand, her expression unreadable. "Well," Jamie asked. "They're divided," she said. "Some think you've compromised the brand. Others think it humanizes you." Jamie let out a slow breath. "And Daniel? He's pushing for a temporary removal from public duties until things settle down." Jamie nodded. "Of course he is." Sophie leaned forward. "There's something else." He looked at her. "Virginia asked to meet Clara." Jamie froze. Did she say why? Number just said it was time. He sat back slowly, heartbeat rising. Sophie studied him. "Is that a bad thing?" "I don't know," Jamie admitted. "But I don't think she's coming to make peace." That night, Clara stood on the terrace alone, arms wrapped around herself, watching the moon rise. Jamie joined her quietly, handing her a cup of chamomile tea. "She wants to meet you," he said gently. Clara didn't react right away. "I figured it was coming," she said at last. Jamie nodded. "I'll be there." "No," Clara said softly. "I want to do it alone." He looked at her, surprised. She met his eyes. "If I'm going to be in this, really in it, I need to face what tried to push me out." Jamie hesitated, then reached out, brushing her hand with his fingertips. "She's sharp, cold. She'll try to cut you." Clara nodded. "I've been broken before. I'm not afraid of sharp." Jamie watched her for a long moment, and then, with quiet reverence, he whispered, "You're stronger than I remembered." Clara looked back at the moon. "I had to be." The clink of watercolor brushes in a rinsing jar was the only sound in the room. Clara sat hunched over a large sketchpad spread across the desk in the corner of the suite, soft afternoon light falling over her shoulder as she traced clean lines with a steady hand. Hope lay belly down on the carpet nearby, coloring her own version of a castle in the clouds. Hazel sat cross-legged beside her, narrating a story that changed every few minutes. It was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that demanded something. Not the tense silence of avoidance. It was soft, alive, whole. Clara had almost forgotten what that kind of quiet felt like. She finished the final stroke of a hummingbird's wing and leaned back, exhaling slowly. She hadn't drawn like this in years, not with purpose, not with the ache to build something more than just a distraction. Jamie had brought the sketchpad home 3 nights ago. No announcement, no pressure. Just left it on the corner of the table with a note that read, "You still have stories to tell." And somehow, that had been enough. Clara stood, stretched, and walked toward the small balcony. From there, Savannah buzzed beneath her, tourists walking hand in hand past cafes, locals perched on stoops sipping sweet tea. Somewhere, a street musician played something old and familiar on a violin. She didn't hear Jamie come in. "Hey," he said behind her, voice low. She turned, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "You're early." "Cancelled a meeting," he said, stepping into the suite, slipping his jacket onto a chair. Didn't feel important anymore. She tilted her head, smiling faintly. "Is this your rebellion arc? More like my realignment arc." He nodded toward the table. "You been working?" Clara walked back to the sketchpad. "Just sketches. Not anything formal." "They look like book pages." She hesitated, then nodded. "I used to dream about illustrating children's stories." "Before." Jamie sat on the arm of the couch. "Why not now?" She glanced at him, uncertain. It's not that simple. Does it have to be? She crossed her arms. Jamie, I've been invisible for years. I don't even know how to start again. Start with them, he said, motioning toward the girls. Tell their stories. Clara looked down at her feet. I don't want to fail them. You won't. How do you know? Because you haven't yet. They were quiet for a moment. Then Jamie reached into his satchel and pulled out a folder. I've been working on something too, he said. Something I want to show you. Clara took the folder slowly, flipped it open, and scanned the documents. Her eyes widened. These are grant applications? He nodded. Local Arts Initiative. They've got funding for community-based projects, especially those involving education or underserved kids. They're looking for proposals. She looked up, stunned. You're applying? Number you are. Her breath caught. Jamie, I talked to the director, showed her a few of your older pieces. She wants to meet you. Clara stepped back. You went behind my back? I didn't pitch you. I opened a door. You don't have to walk through it if you're not ready. She sat on the edge of the bed, papers still in hand. I haven't believed in myself in so long. Then believe in them, he said gently. They already believe in you. The girls ran into the room at that exact moment, giggling, carrying socks on their hands like puppets. Guess what we made? Hazel asked, eyes shining. Clara wiped at the corner of her eye quickly. What? Sock bunnies. Hope held up her creation proudly. We named them Pancake and Trouble. Jamie grinned. I was vetoed from the naming committee. Clara laughed, something free and light escaping her chest. Hope crawled into her lap. Can Pancake be in your next drawing? I think that can be arranged, Clara said, kissing the top of her head. Jamie stood. I'm heading to meet Sophie. She's prepping for the quarterly. Clara nodded. How's the board? Taking things. He paused by the door. They'll survive. She raised an eyebrow. They care about headlines, he said. I care about what comes after. And then he was gone. Clara turned back to the papers in her hands, her heart pounding. She didn't know what scared her more, trying again or allowing herself to hope. The next morning, she stood outside the Savannah Community Arts Center, folder clutched to her chest. Her palms were sweating, her breath short. Sophie waited at the steps, calm and bright. You came. Clara nodded. Barely. Sophie gave her a warm smile. You have something the world needs. Don't keep it locked away. They walked inside together. The gallery was filled with local work. Murals painted by schoolchildren, sculptures made from reclaimed wood, sketches that bled truth onto canvas. Clara's heart ached just looking at them. The director, a woman named Louise with silver curls and paint under her nails, greeted her like an old friend. I've been waiting to meet the woman behind those wings, Louise said, pointing to a copy of Clara's hummingbird sketch Jamie had emailed in advance. Clara flushed. I wasn't sure you'd want someone like me. Louise leaned forward. We want someone exactly like you. As they spoke, something in Clara began to unfold, slowly, carefully, possibility rising like light through cracked shutters. Hours later, she returned to the hotel, her cheeks flushed from conversation, her mind racing. Jamie met her in the hallway. She stopped in front of him, eyes wide. I think I said yes, she whispered. He looked at her for a beat. To what? To everything. Jamie stepped closer. Then I'll be right here. For all of it. She nodded, emotion rising too fast to stop. Even if it's messy, he smiled. Especially if it's messy. The morning started like any other. Soft light slipping through the sheer curtains, the gentle weight of the girls curled against Clara, and the faint scent of coffee brewing from the sweet small kitchen. There was a comfort now to this rhythm, a fragile, unfolding peace that Clara had almost allowed herself to trust. But peace has a way of being loud when it leaves. Jamie stood by the table, scanning something on his phone. his brow furrowed so deeply it carved worry into the quiet. He didn't speak at first, didn't move, just stared, still. Clara noticed the stillness before anything else. "What is it?" she asked, already knowing. He looked up, phone still in hand. "It's out." Clara rose, crossing to him. He turned the screen toward her. It was a photo, her and the girls, taken outside the art center the day before. Clara holding Hope's hand, Hazel swinging her backpack. Jamie's arm around Clara's shoulders, smiling. Casual, beautiful. Underneath the headline, "A Heir's Hidden Legacy. Jameson McAllister's Family Surprise." Clara's breath caught. She took the phone from his hand, scrolling down. Paragraph after paragraph, speculating, pulling pieces from their past, photos from high school, blurry shots from years ago, a rumor that Jamie had a relationship that mysteriously ended, then more, quotes from anonymous sources inside the hotel's boardroom, and an unnamed staffer calling her a quiet disruption. "It's everywhere," Jamie said quietly. 3 national outlets picked it up already, the morning news cycle spinning it. Clara turned slowly. "How?" Jamie sighed. "Daniel, it had to be." Her heart sank. "What happens now?" Jamie shook his head. "I don't know. The board's called an emergency meeting. They want me in by noon." Clara crossed her arms, wrapping them tight across her chest. "You should go. I don't want to leave you." She looked at him then, eyes heavy. "This is what I was afraid of. This is exactly what I knew would happen." Jamie moved toward her, gently reaching for her hands. "Clara, I let them have a taste of stability, of normalcy," she said, voice cracking. "And now the world is going to tear it apart piece by piece." Jamie's voice was calm, but firm. "I'm not the man who let you disappear once, and I'm not going to vanish when it gets hard. You're not doing this alone." She didn't speak, didn't cry, just stood there, shaking slightly, until the sound of tiny footsteps came from the bedroom. Hazel and Hope ran in, still in pajamas, clutching their stuffed bunnies. "Can we have waffles?" Hope asked. Clara knelt down, her voice gentle. "Of course, baby." Jamie watched as Clara gathered them in her arms, smoothing their hair, pressing kisses to their cheeks like she was memorizing them. "I'll be back before lunch," he said softly. "Let's just ride this storm the way we always do, together." Clara didn't look at him when he left. She just held the girls close, wishing their world could stay untouched a little longer. The boardroom at McAllister Holdings was pristine. Long walnut table, polished to a shine. Walls lined with oil paintings of past family patriarchs and magnolia trees in bloom. But the atmosphere was stiff, tense, saturated with unspoken judgment. Daniel stood at the head of the table, already mid-sentence when Jamie entered. "I understand that personal lives are private," Daniel said, addressing the seated members. "But we're at a critical junction for the brand. The Magnolia international expansion is weeks away. Our stakeholders are watching closely." He saw Jamie and nodded with faux politeness. Jameson, we were just discussing how best to handle your situation." Jamie walked to his seat, calm but unflinching. "It's not a situation. It's my family." An older woman at the end of the table, a long-time investor, spoke next. "This could have been managed quietly. Instead, it's a headline. That's not ideal." Jamie looked around. "You want the cleanest story? Fine. Clara and I were in love. We were kids. My mother interfered, and I didn't fight for her. Years passed. She raised my daughters alone, without my help, and now I'm trying to show up. That's the whole story." Silence. He let it sit. "She's not some scandal. She's a woman who survived more than most of us could. And the girls, they're not mistakes. They're the best thing I've ever been part of." Daniel folded his arms. "This isn't just about heartstrings. Our investors care about perception." Jamie turned to him, something steelier in his voice. Then maybe our brand should care more about integrity than perception. Someone near the middle coughed awkwardly. Another leaned toward his notepad, jotting something down. Jamie continued, "If keeping my position means choosing between my title and my children, then take the title." Gasps around the table. Whispers. Daniel's face twitched, just slightly. "I'll walk away from all of it if I have to," Jamie said. "But I won't walk away from them." A pause. Then the woman at the end of the table spoke again, voice quiet. "You'd really step down?" Jamie nodded. "If it meant protecting them." In a heartbeat. Another silence. Finally, she looked at the others. "Then maybe we need to reassess what kind of leadership this company represents. Because what I see is a man taking responsibility. That's the kind of story I'd invest in." Jamie didn't relax. Not yet, but something shifted in the room. A weight moved. Eyes softened. And Daniel, for the first time, looked cornered by something he hadn't predicted: integrity. When Jamie returned to the hotel, Clara was seated by the window, sketchpad in hand, the girls asleep on a makeshift blanket fort behind her. She looked up as he entered. No words, just waiting. "They didn't fire me," he said. Her shoulders dropped in relief. But I offered to step down." She blinked. "Jamie, they didn't take it. Yet. But it's on the table." Clara rose, walking slowly to him. "Why would you do that?" "Because I want to build a life I'm not ashamed of," he said. "And I don't want it if you're not in it." She placed a hand gently over his chest. "You'd give up everything?" He held her gaze. Number, I'd finally be choosing the right thing. And there, in the quiet, in the space between fear and hope, Clara leaned into him, head resting against his shoulder. She didn't say thank you. She didn't have to. Because in that moment, everything had turned. The air inside the suite was still, thick with the kind of quiet that wasn't restful. It was uncertain. Clara stood at the window, arms folded, watching the clouds roll slowly over Savannah. The girls were drawing on the floor, the soft sound of crayons sliding over paper, the only movement in the room. She couldn't stop hearing his words. "Then maybe we need to reassess what kind of leadership this company represents." If it meant protecting them, in a heartbeat. Jamie had stood for them, publicly, clearly, with the kind of strength she'd long stopped believing he was capable of, and that scared her. Because now it meant everything was real, not just borrowed time or fragile comfort, not a fantasy. She stepped into the bedroom, closed the door softly behind her, and pulled her bag from the closet. The same worn canvas she'd carried through shelters, buses, waiting rooms. She unzipped it, pulling out the envelope she kept hidden at the bottom, the one with the birth certificates, a worn-out sketch of a dream house, and the emergency money she never touched unless she had no other choice. She stared at it now. The backup plan, the escape, the just in case. She sat on the bed and held it like a weight in her lap. The door creaked behind her. "Jamie." He leaned against the frame, eyes soft but guarded. "You thinking about leaving again?" She didn't answer. He walked over slowly and sat beside her, careful not to touch her bag. "I know that look," he said gently. "It's the one you used to wear when you thought I wasn't really going to show up." "I don't know how to trust something that's finally good," Clara whispered. "It feels like if I believe in it too hard, it'll vanish." Jamie leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice steady. "Then believe in it a little at a time. Not all at once, just enough to let yourself stay." She looked at him, eyes glistening. This life we've slipped into, it still doesn't feel like mine." Jamie nodded. "Then let's build one that does." Clara dropped her gaze to the envelope. "I used to think being strong meant never depending on anyone, never needing. And now, I think maybe real strength is letting someone help you carry it." A knock came at the door. They both stood, startled. Clara quickly wiped her eyes and tucked the envelope back into her bag. Jamie opened the door. Sophie stepped in, face unreadable, holding her phone out. "You need to see this." Jamie took the phone, eyes scanning quickly. "What is it?" Clara asked. Jamie's jaw tightened. "It's a press op-ed. Someone leaked internal documents, financial ones. There's a full write-up accusing me of misusing company funds to privately support you and the girls." Clara's breath caught. "What?" Sophie added quietly. "It's phrased to sound like favoritism. Nepotism. Jamie's character is being questioned." He handed the phone to Clara. She scanned the words. Her name. The implication that she was a beneficiary of his power. That this was all a carefully constructed narrative. "They're painting me like a gold digger," she murmured. "They're trying to discredit both of us," Jamie said, voice sharp now. "Someone's pushing back. Hard." Sophie glanced between them. "The board's calling another meeting. Emergency session. This one's public." Clara stepped back, her mind spinning. "This is what I was afraid of. This is why I kept my distance. They'll never stop digging." Jamie moved toward her, firm but calm. "Then we stopped running. Together." Clara's voice trembled. "What if they destroy everything you've built?" He didn't hesitate. "Then we build something better." Sophie cleared her throat. "There's one more thing," Louise called, from the Arts Center. The op-ed spooked their sponsors. They want to pause Clara's grant review. Clara closed her eyes. The weight returned, the ache of finally reaching for something, only to have it pulled away. Jamie turned to her. "We'll fight it." Clara opened her eyes slowly. "Number, I'll fight it. You've already done enough." He stepped forward. "I'm not backing away." "I don't want you to," she whispered. "But I need to prove I'm more than the girl in your shadow." Jamie held her gaze, then nodded. "Then let's start now." That evening, Clara walked alone into the Savannah Community Arts Center. No makeup, no handlers, just her sketchpad and her truth. Louise met her in the lobby, hands folded. "I saw the article," Louise said gently. "I figured." Louise hesitated. "The board's nervous. Money makes people skittish." Clara reached into her bag, pulled out the folder she'd been refining for days. "Let them be nervous, but read this first." Louise opened it. Page after page of character sketches, scene mock-ups, a story about two girls who build a world out of color, courage, and imagination. A story that mirrored everything Clara had lived through, just told in ink and watercolor. Louise looked up, eyes softening. "This is beautiful." Clara exhaled. "I'm not a headline. I'm not a controversy. I'm a mother, an artist, and I've fought too hard to let someone else define me." Louise closed the folder carefully. "Let me handle the board." Clara nodded once, then left the center with a strange, quiet power blooming inside her. When she returned to the hotel, Jamie was waiting near the entrance, arms crossed, worry etched across his brow. She walked up to him slowly. "I didn't back down," she said. He smiled, stepping closer. "Neither did I." They stood under the warm lights of the Magnolia's entrance as the city moved around them. Alive, messy, unpredictable. And for the first time, Clara wasn't afraid of being seen. The morning after the public fallout, Savannah moved slower, like it was holding its breath. Jamie sat on the edge of the hotel bed, tying his shoes in silence, while Clara stood near the vanity, brushing Hazel's hair. Hope was still curled under the blanket fort they'd made the night before, her tiny hand clutching Pancake the sock bunny. It was the kind of quiet that felt temporary. "I'll be back after the board session," Jamie said finally. Clara nodded but didn't turn around. He stood, hesitated, then walked over and kissed the top of Hazel's head. "Be good, sweetheart." Hazel gave him a sleepy smile. "Bring home juice boxes." Clara didn't look up. He paused behind her, hand hovering near her back, then thought better of it. He picked up his jacket and left with the door clicking gently behind him. Only then did Clara stop brushing. She stared at her reflection. Her hair was pinned, her blouse neat, but her eyes, they looked like they did in the mirror years ago. The morning she left the apartment with nothing but a hospital bag and a broken heart. Hazel noticed. "Mama, are you sad?" Clara turned, forcing a soft smile. "No, baby, just tired." But Hazel tilted her head, the way she always did when she didn't quite believe you. "You look like when I drew the sad sun. Remember? The one behind the clouds." Clara knelt and pulled her into a hug. "Well, maybe today we move the clouds, Hazel hugged her tight. "Okay." After breakfast, Clara gathered the girls' art supplies and set them up by the window. Crayons rolled across the table while the girls argued over which shade of purple should be used for the sky. Clara stepped into the bedroom and closed the door behind her. She needed a moment. She needed clarity. She opened her notebook and stared at the half-written letter she'd started the night before. It wasn't a goodbye. Not exactly. But it was a just in case. A bridge she could fold away if the storm swallowed them again. Her pen hovered over the paper. Jamie had shown up for her, again and again. But the world he came from, it didn't just push back, it punished. Could they really live in the middle of that? Her fingers tightened around the pen. She didn't hear Sophie knock until the second time. Clara opened the door, startled. Sophie held out an envelope, eyes gentle. "He asked me to bring this to you if things, didn't go the way he hoped." Clara took the envelope slowly, heart thudding. "What happened?" Sophie hesitated. "He made a choice. I think he wants you to know it, before the world tells you." Clara closed the door, her hands already trembling. She sat on the edge of the bed and opened the envelope. Inside, two things. A resignation letter addressed to the McAllister Board of Directors, and a handwritten note. "Clara, if this is in your hands, then I've stepped away. Not from you, not from the girls, but from the title, the boardroom, the world that never made space for us. I told them I'd rather build something real with you than protect something fake for them. If you walk away, I'll understand. But I hope you don't. I hope you stay. Not because you owe me anything, but because I'm finally the man who will fight for the right things. Jay." Her hand covered her mouth. She blinked hard, trying to keep the tears from blurring the words. He had walked away. For her, for their daughters, for a future not yet built, but believed in. She stood abruptly, opened the closet, and pulled down her canvas bag, no longer as a backup, but as a step forward. At the Magnolia boardroom, tension lingered like fog. Jamie stood in front of the panel, posture calm, but voice unwavering. "I'm not here to ask for understanding," he said. "I'm here to say that I'm not the face of something that treats love like a liability." He placed his letter on the table. "This is my resignation." Daniel blinked. "You're serious?" "I am." An older board member leaned forward. "You built this company with us." "And I'm proud of what we built," Jamie said. "But I won't lose my family just to keep it." Whispers swept through the room. Virginia, seated near the back, hadn't spoken. But now, she did. "Jameson," she said, her voice firm. He turned, surprised. She stood slowly. "I once believed protecting our name meant controlling your choices. I see now it meant erasing what mattered." Jamie stared, unsure of what he was hearing. Virginia walked to the front of the room. "I support my son, and if that costs us a few headlines, so be it." Gasps, murmurs. Jamie's jaw clenched. Virginia looked at him, something breaking through her composed facade. "I was wrong," she said simply. Then she sat back down. Jamie's hand rested on the back of his chair. "Then let the record show, this family is built on more than image. It's built on truth." Clara arrived just after the meeting had ended. She stepped off the elevator, searching the room until she saw him. Still standing, jacket in one hand, exhaustion etched into his face. He looked up. She walked straight to him. "I read your letter," she said quietly. His breath hitched. "I didn't know if—" She cut him off by stepping closer. "I don't want you to give up everything for me." "I didn't," he said. "I gave it up for us." Clara's eyes shimmered. "Then let's make it worth something." He reached for her hand, and when she took it, fingers laced tightly with his, something finally felt finished. Not the story, but the weight they had carried for too long. 2 weeks had passed since the storm broke. Savannah had softened again, its streets warm, the live oaks blooming a deeper green as spring unfolded around them. But inside, room 1201, the air was different now. Lighter, settled, like something that had held its breath too long had finally exhaled. Clara stood at the kitchenette, stirring sugar into the girls' morning tea. She glanced at the table, where Hazel and Hope sat cross-legged in their pajamas, scribbling hearts and stars onto an envelope marked, "To Ms. Louise." "We have to send this today," Hazel said without looking up. "It's for the wall," Clara smiled. "The gallery wall, right?" Hope nodded. Ms. Louise said every artist gets a story note on the wall. Clara's heart swelled, equal parts awe and disbelief. The art center had called her 3 days ago, officially accepting her illustrated story project. They offered her a small studio space, funding for materials, and a feature at the spring exhibition. She was becoming something she hadn't let herself imagine in years, visible. Jamie appeared behind her, freshly showered, barefoot, reading something on his phone. Clara glanced at him. "News." He nodded. "The Magnolia board voted this morning. They've asked me to come back." She turned, startled. "They what?" "They're restructuring the leadership model. More transparency, new values. Apparently, what happened sparked a bigger conversation." "And they want you back?" Jamie looked up. "Only if I want to return." He set the phone down and leaned on the counter. "Thing is, I'm not sure I do." Clara raised an eyebrow. "Really?" "I've been sleeping," he said, almost laughing at the thought. "Actually sleeping. Spending mornings watching Hope try to convince Hazel that pancakes are a food group, helping you color in castle windows." Clara smiled. "That does sound more rewarding than quarterly reports." Jamie stepped forward, voice quieter now. "I built the Magnolia because I wanted to give people somewhere to land. But maybe I was trying to build something for myself too. Something that looked like belonging." He brushed her hand gently. "Now I have that. Here. With you. I'm not sure I need the rest of it anymore." Clara looked at him for a long moment, something in her chest unspooling, slow and careful. "You don't have to give up everything to prove something to me," she said. "I'm not," he replied. "I'm choosing differently. That's not giving up." Later that afternoon, Clara stood in her new studio, a small sunlit room in the back wing of the art center. The walls were still bare, the floors marked with old paint stains, but it was hers. She stood in front of the easel, sketchpad open, pencil in hand, the first outlines of a new story beginning to form. Jamie walked in quietly, holding 2 coffees. He set one down and looked around. "It smells like potential in here." Clara smirked. "And old paint." He walked to the window. "You ever think about doing this before the girls came along?" "I did," she said softly. "But I was always trying to survive. Dreams felt like a luxury. And now—" She looked at her page. 2 little girls drawn under a treehouse sky, swinging on ropes made of stars. "Now it feels like the only thing that's real." Jamie watched her, then stepped closer. "You're not going back, are you?" "To what?" "To hiding. To disappearing when it gets hard." She didn't flinch. "Number, I'm done shrinking." The silence between them was rich, thick with a kind of reverence, Then Clara turned, pressing a hand to his chest. I don't know what our future looks like, Jamie. Not really. I've lived too many versions of almost to make promises. He placed his hand over hers. Then don't promise anything. Just stay. She leaned into him, cheek against his shirt, eyes fluttering closed. That I can do. Outside the studio, Virginia sat quietly in her car, parked across the street. She watched the two of them through the window. Her son, the woman she once worked to erase, and the life that had somehow returned full circle. The driver cleared his throat gently. Shall I take you back, Mom? Virginia didn't answer at first. She watched as Clara stepped back from Jamie, took his hand and pulled him toward the easel, showing him her sketches. She smiled as she spoke, animated, alive. Virginia's jaw clenched, but not from anger, from something else. She reached into her purse and pulled out a sealed envelope. On it, in careful handwriting, to Hazel and Hope. She passed it forward to the driver. Have this delivered to the Grand Magnolia. He nodded. Of course. As they pulled away from the curb, Virginia looked out the window a moment longer, lips pressed into a thin line. Then, finally, she whispered, They deserve better than the silence I gave their mother. Back at the suite, the girls returned from their play date with Sophie, faces flushed from sun and popsicles. Jamie bent down. Guess what? Hazel beamed. What? You got mail. He handed them the envelope. Clara opened it carefully, frowning. Inside were 2 silver chains, lockets, small, delicate, and a note. You are not mistakes. You are miracles. I'm sorry it took me this long to say it. Virginia. Clara read the words twice before she passed one of the lockets to Hazel, then to Hope. Hope whispered, Does this mean we have a grandma? Clara looked at Jamie, who gave her the smallest nod. She turned back to her daughters, her voice low and full of something steady. It means you always did. They didn't understand the weight of it, not yet, but someday they would. And when they did, it would be a story of strength, of choosing love over legacy, of rewriting what once was broken. And this time, Clara wouldn't be standing on the outside. She'd be at the center, pen in hand, heart wide open. The gallery smelled like fresh paint and hope. The Savannah Spring Art Showcase buzzed with soft voices and clinking glasses, the hum of admiration moving through the crowd like wind through trees. Spotlights traced across paintings, sculptures, and handcrafted stories. But in the East Hall, nestled beneath a vaulted skylight, a corner had been transformed into something else entirely. Clara stood just inside the space, watching the stream of guests pause at her exhibit. The Girl Beneath the Oaks, hand-drawn pages framed in natural wood, watercolors of a young mother, 2 small girls, and the golden streets of Savannah, rendered in soft brushstrokes and aching truth. Her story. Their story. There was a hush to the space that others didn't have. Visitors lingered longer here. Some wiped tears from their cheeks. Others smiled quietly, nodding as if they'd been given permission to remember something they'd buried. Clara watched them all, heart pounding gently. She wore a navy dress with soft sleeves and a locket around her neck. The same one Jamie had given her years ago, now matched by 2 identical ones worn by the girls, who had left glitter trails through the entire gallery. Sophie appeared beside her, holding a glass of lemonade. You have a line forming, she said with a grin. Clara turned. She did. People waiting to meet her, to ask, to thank, to connect. I'm not used to being seen, Clara said under her breath. Sophie smiled. You didn't have to be seen to matter. But now that you are, people are better for it. Clara took the glass, still stunned by the swirl of the last few weeks. How her life had expanded. Not suddenly, but steadily, like water soaking into dry ground. Jamie leaving the Magnolia board permanently. Virginia coming to Sunday dinner for the first time. Awkward and quiet, but present. Hazel asking to take ballet. Hope learning to write her name in big, proud letters. And the studio. Heron fully funded. Named The Nest by the girls. A place where stories were painted, shaped, held. As Clara turned to greet the next guest, she saw him, Jamie, leaning against the far column, a little more unshaven than usual, wearing a simple white shirt and jeans, no fanfare, no title. But when he looked at her, it was the same way he had years ago, before ambition, before legacy, before loss. That boy who saw her first. Not for what she could become, but for who she already was. Their eyes met across the room, and the noise of the crowd disappeared. Later that night, after the lights dimmed and the last guest wandered out into the warm spring air, Clara sat on the empty floor of the gallery with her shoes kicked off, sipping ginger tea from a paper cup. Jamie lowered himself beside her, holding out a plastic container. "Leftover lemon cake," he said. She took it, spooned a bite, then tilted her head. "You're still here. Where else would I be?" A pause. "I'm proud of you," he said softly. "Not just tonight, but for staying, for turning every hard thing into something worth showing." She smiled. "It's still hard. I still wake up wondering if all this is real." "It is," he said. "You're not dreaming. You're building." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. "I used to think love was something you chased," she said. "Something you had to fight to keep from slipping away. And now I think it's something you return to, over and over, like a place that knows your name." Jamie reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She opened it. It was a deed to a small house on Tybee Island, the one they used to talk about back when they were just teenagers, with nothing but a beat-up truck and a shared dream. Clara stared at the page. "It's not big," he said, "but it's got a porch swing and a fig tree." Her voice caught. "Jamie, I didn't want to surprise you," he said quickly. "I just wanted to show you what a beginning could look like, if you wanted it." She looked at him, searching. "You're not asking me to leave everything I've built?" "No," he said. "I'm asking you to bring it with you." Outside, the sound of street musicians drifted in from the square. Someone played a slow, mournful jazz tune. It filled the quiet with warmth. Clara exhaled. "Okay," she whispered. Jamie blinked. "Okay." She nodded. "Let's build the rest of the story there." 3 months later, the house on Tybee Island smelled like rosemary and ocean air. The walls were still half bare, the furniture mismatched, but the girls had turned the spare room into an art cave, and the porch swing creaked in rhythm with the tide. Clara stood barefoot in the kitchen, brushing flour off her hands, while Hope stirred cookie dough, and Hazel hummed a song she made up on the spot. Jamie stood outside, fixing a wind chime that had come loose, and when he glanced through the screen door and caught Clara watching him, he smiled. The kind of smile that says, "We made it." That night, as the girls fell asleep wrapped around their storybooks, Clara stepped outside and joined Jamie on the porch swing. She curled into his side, listening to the night sounds, frogs, crickets, distant laughter. "I used to wonder if I was allowed to be happy," she said. He kissed the top of her head. "You don't need permission anymore." She held his hand. "Do you think we'll ever forget what it felt like, being lost?" "No," he said, "but we'll remember how we found our way back." They swung quietly for a long time. Then Jamie reached into his back pocket and pulled out 2 folded drawings. Clara looked at him, curious. He handed her the first. It was a crayon sketch Hazel had made. A stick-figure family, 4 people, hand in hand, beneath a crooked house with hearts around it. A tiny tree stood off to the side. "That's us," Clara whispered. Jamie handed her the second. Hope had drawn a pair of wings wrapped around a small nest. Inside were 2 eggs and a smiley-faced son. "She said it's her dream," Jamie murmured, "that we'll never be outside again." Clara stared at the drawings, her throat tightening. They sat there for a long time, not needing to say anything else. Because this was the ending they never dared to write. The one they built together. Not perfect, but true.